When we're young, we have an amazing, positive outlook about how great life is going to be, but somewhere along the line, we forget to dream and end up settling. Join Up Dots features amazing people who refuse to give up and chose to go after their dreams. This is your blueprint for greatness. So here's your host, live from the back of his garden in the UK, David Ralph.
Yes, hello there. Good morning, world. How are we all? Are we rocking and rolling? This is Join Up Dots. Of course it is, because you clicked and you found us. And hopefully you've been with us for the last 149 shows, because the inspirational content that we provide on a daily basis is just getting better and better and better. And today's guest is a man who really has a story that is, well, I'll explain what it's about. He is a man who could quite rightly claim to have had two lives, and in classic Join Up Dots style, both lives are so closely intertwined that one wouldn't have been possible without the other. As a young man, he was on a path that wasn't good, getting into trouble with the law and spending time in jail on drug offences. His life was heading one way and one way only. But in all our lives, we are provided opportunities in the strangest of places that can help us become what we want to be. It's whether we actually spot those opportunities. That's the true issue that faces us all. Well, our guest did. And whilst in jail, he discovered computers and set off on an entrepreneurial journey that would instantly lead to failure, and then another failure, until finally gaining traction and success came his way. He bootstrapped Spheric Technologies, a social enterprise consulting and applications company, which grew by 150% each year, ranked in many business awards, employed over 30 employees before he sold it in May of 2008. And now he's on a path that is based around his own passions to support himself and his family, of course, whilst also giving back to the world in the form of several charitable organisations. So does he look back on his life and thank the dark times for showing him the way? And what made him try several times to get going in business and still keep going when the road got hard? Well, let's find out as we bring onto the show to start joining up dots, the one and only Mr. Dan Martell. How are you, Dan?
I'm great, David. Thanks for having me on. I'm super honored to be on the 150th show. This is going to be good.
It is. It's amazing. You know, when you start these kind of things, you want to get to 10 and then you want to get to 20. And I remembered thinking, what should I do for my 100th show? And now, within weeks, I'm thinking, my God, what should I do for my 200th show? It really does sort of rattle on. One day goes into another, Dan, doesn't it?
It does. It's exciting.
Well, what is exciting in your life then? You seem to be somebody, I've been doing a bit of virtual stalking on you, and you seem a man who's got many sort of fingers in different pies and stuff. Are there ones that sort of wake you up each morning and go, oh, don't really fancy doing this? And there's others that go, this is brilliant. Or have you constructed a life now which literally every day you wake up and go, here we go, this is going to be a good one?
Yeah, no, I'm honestly blessed to be able to, jump out of bed excited and kind of tackle the day. It's, it's been a few years now. I'm on my fifth company. I'm 34. I feel old in the tech industry because most of the kids now are 18 or 20 years old. So I've been doing this for over 10 years. And, my life, I've got two young boys. I've got a great wife, a great company called Clarity that I get to run with some amazing, smart people. So honestly, every day is an exciting day just because I've got so many great people that take the less desirable things on. I love to hire people that work at the things or play at the things I work.
So what are the things that you don't like? And we are going to touch into you actually creating these companies because that's the kind of entrepreneurial spirit that the story does. But I know just doing what I'm doing, that there is so much of my day that I think, I can't be bothered with this, setting up tweets and God knows what. It's the social media thing that kind of gets me down. What's the kind of things that you go, no, I'm going to hand that over. It's not going to be part of my life anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much anything that I feel that I'm not uniquely qualified to work on. So a long time ago, I think many of your listeners, if they haven't, they should. I read a book called 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. And in the book, he gave a really simple framework. He says, take your hourly rate. So if you're making 100,000 a year, or even 50,000 a year, it's, divide that by 2 and then divide it by 2 again. So, 50,000 a year is $25 an hour, $12.50 an hour is the number. If you can outsource that activity in your life to somebody else, it's worth doing. So, I mean, I've been at this for so long now, it pretty much all the things from checking my mail, like physical mail, to, doing any physical labor, lawn care, maintenance, et cetera. I have just a bunch of great people that support our lives. So I can spend my time doing the thing that I'm most qualified and uniquely positioned to do that creates value.
The 4-Hour Work Week, I know it's quite old now, but I'm looking at it's on my bookshelf as well. And it was a life-changing book for me. I remember page 44, I've said this in numerous shows, when I read it and I thought to myself, I'm never going back. This was a mindset shift for me. But what you're saying is absolutely true about outsourcing. But of course, when you're starting, you're scrabbling around for pennies. Were you able to outsource right from the very beginning, or is it just something now that because you are quote unquote more successful, you've got that ability? So our listeners out there who are starting on this entrepreneurial lifestyle, they will obviously be trying to do everything themselves. Is that a wise thing to do, or should they go, no, actually, I know it's going to cost me some money. I don't think I've got that money, but I could find it if I want to, and it's going to be money in the bank?
In today's world, again, I started such a long time ago, there weren't the tools and resources. I mean, for $5, there's a site called Fiverr with 2Rs.com. You can get people to do the most amazing things, from set up your website, to create a logo, to transcribe documents, to pretty much anything. I mean, you can even get somebody to sing a song for your friend's birthday party for $5, right? And then there's other sites like Elance and Odesk where for $3 an hour, you can ask somebody to do research for you, or put together a document, or create a presentation. And at a local level, just paying somebody to do your bookkeeping, for a couple $100 a year, so that you can focus on creating the value for your customer and not sitting there on Sundays managing paperwork. I don't think there's a point where anybody starting a business or even creating a project shouldn't have some level of help. It may not be full-time, definitely mostly part-time, but the investment in setting that up will just give you so much more time to do the thing that really creates the value.
It's absolutely true. I started this and I haven't had one person help me. Every single thing I've actually done myself. And I've got a mindset now to outsource. And somebody said to me the other day, why didn't you outsource earlier? And I said, I wanted to know the ins and outs of doing this job, so that when I do outsource it and the VA says, oh, it took me 2 hours to do, I can say, no, it doesn't. It only takes you 20 minutes because I've been doing it for the last 6 months. And so I've kind of gone that route, so I know it better than anybody else. Is that a wise way of doing it, or should I just sort of hand it over to the powers?
I think it's super wise. Actually, last night, funny enough, I was helping a friend of mine has a local. He has a bunch of restaurants. He came over because he was interested in Facebook ads, and I think the outcome he was hoping for was me suggesting somebody he could hire to do it. But I suggested that he create some ads and set up some landing pages himself. I showed him the tools. I helped him wire it up, because when you do go to outsource or hire somebody to do it, you're just going to be so much more knowledgeable about the terms and the way it works, so that you can hold them accountable. And it just helps you just become a better entrepreneur. Documenting it, adding your creative input to the certain pieces of it, those are all important. And just deferring to somebody else and hoping that they're going to make you successful, I think is dangerous. So it's kind of a fine mix of learn, document, implement for yourself, and then outsource. But there's a lot of things like bookkeeping. I still don't understand it, don't need to understand it, and would never want to touch QuickBooks.
So let's take you back in time, because a couple of times in the conversation in the first 10 minutes, you've said, I've been in this game for quite a long time, but you're still a young man, you're 34 years old. So when was the first time that you actually had the entrepreneurial vibe? Well, if we went back to say like an 8-year-old or a 9-year-old or whatever, were you somebody out there washing cars and mowing lawns and trying to hustle to get a buck or two?
It wasn't, I don't know why, it wasn't really a monetary thing, but the first thing I remember ever doing was, I grew up in Eastern Canada, but so we have a lot of snow, and I created a snow fort, and I would charge people to play in the snow fort. So I guess you could say I was into real estate at a very young age. It was probably about 8 or 9. But it was never for the money. It was just the pay me for what I created because this is awesome. And that kind of continued into tree forts and, just other entrepreneurial ventures around flea markets. And, I one time I got clever and I bought some really popular items from one end of the flea market, and then started at the other end where people actually walked in, and I sold them the same thing I had bought for, 50% more, just because I was there first. So I guess I'm always trying to figure out, how to create or extract, value from what I come up with. But I've never, I never had a paper route or sold or had a lemonade stand, but I definitely was a builder.
It's weird, that lemonade stand business, because the amount of Americans that have said that. In the United Kingdom, I've never once seen anyone create a lemonade stand, and I've never once heard anyone do it. But it seems to be something that is prevalent in American childhood. You're all setting up lemonade stands all over the place.
100%. I think it's just the thing you do. I mean, newspaper routes, lemonade stands, going door to door trying to sell flowers. It's all part of the culture.
Do people actually stop and buy lemonade from a kid, or do they think, oh my God, what's he made it out of?
No, I mean, usually they set up at a yard sale or some other kind of event. I always do. I mean, I guess just out of pure support of meeting a young entrepreneur, I always give them $5 for a 50 cents cup of lemonade. But, and maybe that's what keeps it going forward is people like myself doing that. But I think it's just part of our culture and something that we identify with.
They must love you in the neighborhood, all these kids. Come along with $5. That's like a fortune.
Oh, the smart ones actually know that I'm coming. And the other day I stopped at one, and his parents told him if Dan shows up, ask him for $20 for the muffin. And I kind of laughed.
And did you pay $20?
I did not pay $20. I negotiated, as any good entrepreneur should do.
Absolutely. Drag them down to reality. That's what kids need in their lives. Right,
there you go.
Let's take you right back, because your path is, as I said in the intro, it is two stories, really. But it seemed to me, reading about you this week, it was two stories, but I couldn't decide whether the second part would have happened without the first part, and the first part and vice versa. Do you feel that, or is that a very simplistic way of looking at it?
No, I feel that 100%. It's what's funny about that story, the fact that, I grew up in foster homes and group homes. Essentially, got taken out of my house when I was 11 and, got into drugs when I was about 13, 14, 15 and ended up in jail, and then kind of went back there and eventually rehab and discover computers. I never told that story for almost 12 years. It was something that, after I graduated high school and I started, entrepreneurial things, I just felt like it was not something I obviously wanted to disclose. And after 12 years, I was speaking at a conference and somebody got up in the audience and he asked me this question. He said, why do you think you're such a risk taker? Because, as you've read in my story, the first two companies are complete failures. And, I finally figured it out. And, I think risk taking and being risky as an entrepreneur is just part of the game. And when he asked me that, I just felt so compelled to tell him the story, because in my head, I'm laughing. The things that I do today as an entrepreneur compared to the stuff I used to do as a teenager are just not even on the same level, right? I mean, I used to do things that would literally put my life on the line and still make those decisions. So, worst case in business is, I make a decision that means I go bankrupt and I got to sleep on my brother's couch for a few months till I build things back up, not even on the same field. So I know that, any success that I've had in my, my life and my family, it's because of what I went through as a teenager.
But you've now got a powerful mindset. Just the fact that you said then, I could lose it all, sleep on a sofa for 3 months or so, and I get it back. Now, that is powerful, isn't it? To be in that position where so many people are either scared to actually enter into it, so they're in a crappy job and they don't like it, but they think they've got to stick with it. You're in a position now, because you've seen both sides, you can go, yeah, I can go again. So you are able to make bigger and bolder decisions, because the worst that can happen is, okay, I haven't got any money and I have to cancel my Netflix for a few months, but I can get it back. Did you feel that?
Yeah, well, there's two things that I learned a long time ago that nobody can take from me, regardless of the financial side, the stuff, the business, the employees, that can all go away. But the two things that allows me to feel a sense of possibility is the people I know, the relationships that I've built, and the value or the goodwill that I've created amongst those people. And it's my mind, right? It's my thoughts, it's my creativity, it's my ability to communicate. And as long as those two things are good, I don't do something malicious and take advantage of people and burn my reputation, or, get into some kind of accident that's so bad that, my mind doesn't work the same way. That is all I need. And I think it's super powerful to think about that, because I think most people in normal jobs, they don't think about the value of the relationships and how powerful that is in creating things in the world. So as long as those people that I've done good for in the past are still around, and no matter what I'm going through, I just got to ask for help. and they're going to want to give back because, you know, when you do good for other people, there's a sense of reciprocity. They want to do something for you, and they're just waiting for you to ask. So those two things are what allow me to take the big risks and go for the things that just seem so out there, not possible, because, you know, worst case, if it doesn't work out, I get back up, I do it again.
Well, when did that realization of providing value to people and giving come to the fore? Because I have no drugs in my life. I've never known drugs, so I'm just speaking totally from the top of my head. But I would imagine somebody who's taking drugs, it is a very selfish thing. You want to get your high. You want to get more of it. It's all me, 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 me. Now you flip that on your head and you're seeing that the more you give back to the world, the more powerful it is. Can you remember when that actual realization came to you?
100%. It was when I was about 17 in rehab. There's this saying that they teach you, which is you can only keep what you give away. And if you want sobriety, you have to engage and help other people. And if you want love in your life, you got to give love first, unconditionally, without expectations. And it turns out that principle, that idea, goes for so many things in business. If you want money, don't act like it's scarce. Give it away. Support other people. If you want to be successful, I mean, if you're having a hard day today, I would suggest the number one thing you could do is go help somebody else. It will help them. It will get your mind kind of reset, your attitude, your energy, and just allow you to kind of tackle on bigger things. So, you know, I've always believed I only get to keep what I give away, and that applies in all aspects of my life.
I'm fascinated by this, and it's an area of conversation I wasn't expecting to get into, but it is so important for the listeners out there, because I know how difficult it is to get things going when they think that they've got to spend a lot of money. And you're saying that if you act as if you haven't got any money, you will remain that way. And if you give it away and you act sensibly, but like you have got more money, ultimately it will come to you. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and it's not the dollar amount. That's what's crazy, right? I mean, one thing that I do on a continuous basis is if I'm in a lineup in a drive-through for coffee, is I'll pay for the person behind me, right? And I'll just, you know, I'll give them an extra $5 and say, hey, pay for whoever, how many people that pays for behind me, and I just drive away. And I feel like those moments and it's really just, it's not because I want recognition or anything. I just know that you know, the universe rewards courageous decisions. It rewards people doing things that are good for other people. I really believe that we're in some ways all connected, right? So the more good you put out there, it comes back, and it's not about the size of it. It's really the thought. So I think, you know, one of the fun things I like try to do is creatively come up with ways I can do that where it's not a lot of money, but the impact is huge.
I think I would want to see their face though. As when I'm at that coffee drive-through and I drive away, I think I'd have to pull up somewhere just so that I could see the shock on their face. Even though they don't get out of the car and thank me, that is just, in today's day and age, that's a bit strange to happen. They must be jaw-dropping moments for these people.
You know what I hope for, and it hasn't happened yet, and the reason why I continue doing it, because someday I know that I'm going to drive up to that window and somebody would have paid for me.
It's just going to come full circle. You pay.
It will. It someday it will spread as an idea in the community, as a thing that we do, and when it comes back, that's the day that I kind of smile and realize, like, okay, that was cool. And you know, it hasn't happened. It's been many, many years, but I don't stop, because I do believe someday it will.
I do love that. I do love that, and I'm actually going to do that myself, Dan. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to pay for a stranger, and
that's awesome,
and see what happens. So you paid it forward. You've sent that vibe across the pond, and it's going to spread like wildfire in the UK. Who knows? And then when you come over here, you'll be in a pub one day, and there's a pint already waiting for you.
I'll be like, do you know David? Do you listen to his podcast?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, yeah. How do you know? That's awesome. Fascinating
stuff. So when you were in jail, and I'm not going to spend too much time on that because God forbid, I bet you've had so many podcasts when they've really dwelled on this part of you. But what was it that made you change? What was it when you suddenly said, yes, I can't be on the path? Because it was a path that you chose. It was a path that you went into twice. You got into trouble and then you went into trouble again. What was it the moment when you went, no, this is enough is enough. I've actually seen a different way of operating, and it's a better way than what I've got. I want that.
Yeah, well, the moment came the second time. It was funny because the first time when I got out, obviously you get out, you think I'm going to change my life. This is never going to happen again. I'm never going to see these people. And I remember saying that to the guard, and he just smiled and he says, "I'll see you soon." And I said, "No, you won't." And he said, "Yeah, I will. We always do." Right? 70% of people that get out of jail reoffend. And I added to that statistic because a year later, here I found myself, getting chased by police in a high-speed chase and arrested and sentenced. And, while I was in that second incarceration, I got in a fight and locked down to what's called solitary for 3 days. So for 3 days, you get locked down for 23 and a half hours. You don't see anybody. You're in a small cell. And this guard, Brian, was the guy that came. He had been on, it was the weekend. He came back and heard that I was in solitary, came to let me out and sat me down. And Brian was one of those guys that didn't say a whole lot, kind of like the strong silent type. And he sits me down in this room that's kind of overlooking the cell block. So there's like 2 tiers of cells, and there's like this glass room where the guards spend a lot of time. And he brings me in there, sits me down, and just looks at me and asked me a question. He goes, "What are you doing here?" Right? I'm 16 at the time, 17. He says, "What are you doing here?" And I was like, "Well, I got in trouble with the cops. I got in a high-speed chase." He says, "No." He said, "What are you doing here?" He said, "You are not like them." And I didn't understand what he meant. I was like, "What do you mean I'm not like them?" He said, "Dan, I watch you out there. You're studying. You want to do good. You're smart. You interact with people. You're always polite." He says, "You're not like the rest of them. You don't belong here." And that was the first time, David, the first time in my whole life for about 6 years since I was 11 and I got taken out of my home, that I didn't feel like I deserved the environment I was in. Everybody else always said that I was a bad person, a bad kid, hyperactive, always in trouble, an instigator, all these things. And I believed it. And here was for the first time in my life at 17 years old, somebody that said, "I believe in you."
So did you believe the bad comments, or did you play up to them? Did you want to actually confirm what they were saying so that you felt...
I think it was a bit of both. I mean, what I've learned in life now is that people expand to the containers that they're given. Right. And I believe this for their environment, their friends, their relationships, the conversations they have with themselves in their own head. So, I think it was a bit of both. I think it was the people saying it and then me, feeling that it must be true and living up to it and proving them, right. And, it was one of those things where, because of that moment where it changed my life, I decided, Brian's right. I don't belong here, and I'm going to do something to change it. And kind of, I was a good person. I wasn't the bad person everybody said I was. I just decided at that moment, I'm always going to do that in the future. Is when I meet people, I'm gonna paint them into the kind of the picture. I mean, it's the reason why I have 2 little boys, 1 and 2 years old, and I called one Max and one Noah. And Max is Max because he's the oldest and he's more quiet and reserved, and I want him to be more outgoing. And Noah's the second oldest, which means he's probably going to be more excited and class clown, and you need to tame him down a bit. So, I truly believe that concept that, people grow into the containers that they're given, physically and, with the words they're used.
So what container were you in? Was it just peer pressure?
Bad kid, always in trouble. Don't spend time with him. Not sane, crazy.
Yeah, but was it your mates that you were hanging around with? Were you
no,
somebody?
It was the adults.
Oh, it was adults, was it?
It was the adults. It was the social workers. It was the psychologists. It was the group home staff. It was the teachers. It was the principals. It was, my friends' parents. It was all these, whatever you want to call them, saying these things about me.
Now, I think you are a hugely inspiring guy. And the only thing that you've said to me in this whole conversation that I think to myself, why Dan, was why didn't you share that story? Because that's the powerhouse story, isn't it? That somebody that really had nothing, they had no opportunities, has turned their life around so much that they are, an uber success. They've got online businesses, they've got companies, they're mixing with their sort of movers and shakers. I would have thought right at the very beginning, that would have been the badge of honor to use. That would have been the thing to say to them in these presentations that, you've got more opportunities than I had, and look where I am. Why are you holding yourself back? Why are you not getting off your backside and doing these things? Why are you waiting till Friday and then going back to work again on Monday if you don't like it? Why? Look at me, I've done it and I had nothing. I think that would have been a powerful statement to make. Why do you think you held back on that?
I know it was fear of being judged, and a fear, and that judgment, the belief that I had that just didn't serve me for so many years was I felt like I needed to achieve a higher level of success before I could tell anybody. And it was the craziest thing. I mean, I became a millionaire when I was 27. I've invested in 33 companies as an angel investor. I've started 5 companies, 2 were complete failures, 2, I've on to my 3rd successful one, raised venture capital. And still I felt like until I become a billionaire, that it wasn't something I wanted to share. And that is the most ridiculous thing ever, because when I told it for the first time 2 years ago when I launched Clarity on stage in front of 300 entrepreneurs, after I got off stage, I had a lineup of a dozen people coming up to me, hugging me in tears, telling me that they had experienced something similar, either with themselves or somebody in their family went through it. I had one father come up and hug me, and he didn't say anything. And later on, I had to find out why. And he was a foster dad, right? He had someone like me go through and always wondered if he would ever kind of figure it out and get through life. And I just thought, I'm never going to hold back and tell that story, because the connections that I made when I came off that stage and since then, just with people one-on-one, hopefully with your audience, it's real. This is who I am. This is what I went through, unfiltered. And I would rather have that conversation than the one that most people have with other people on a daily basis, which is, positioned and super, trying to look a certain way. And there's no depth to it. It's not real. I want to connect with people on a real level.
Well, you've certainly done it with me. That was life-changing, that story. I found it so inspiring. And the thing that I found interesting was that you wanted to be a millionaire and then you wanted to be a billionaire. So really what you were trying to do was get as far away from that situation as possible until somebody couldn't look at you and go, I can drag you back.
100%. That was the fear. I had a fear of being judged. I had a fear of, if I tell people and I haven't had the success I thought I needed, that my investors would decide that they wouldn't want to be around me anymore, that people would not listen to me anymore, that whatever I was doing was always going to be tainted as that guy that went to jail. And it was so far from the truth that, I'm glad I didn't wait 20 years. It took me 10, but it's one of those things where I think people deal with every day, where they have a story and they don't want to talk about it for whatever reason, but it's through that personal connection of being raw and honest where people start sharing their stories, and that's where real relationships are created.
So is it a human trait? Do you see it quite often that people are trying to leave behind their pasts? Because on this show, we actually consciously embrace the past, because I believe, and the listeners believe, because I get so many emails confirming this now, that the things that we are doing in adult life when we are successful, as you were doing, you were building your sort of igloos and all those kind of stuff. And what you were effectively doing as a kid was not trying to make money, was trying to prove yourself about the creation. Now you're in an adult situation where you're creating companies and you're moving on from company to company. It seems once again to me, you're doing the same thing as you were doing as a kid. You are creating and then looking for other opportunities to create again, and that fulfills you. Do you think that humans are missing a trick if they try to separate their past from where they are now?
100%. I mean, it's what's weird about my story is I actually still and have been for every year, 3 or 4 times a year, I would visit Portage, the rehab center I went to, and meet with the kids and talk to them and, sponsor and help with fundraising. So like I lived this dual life where, my family might know that I was doing that, but I would never share it with my best friends. I mean, even my wife, for a year, I never told her, right? And it took 2 years until I told her parents. And it was just, it's funny how all what you've done will shape you into what you can accomplish. And instead of leveraging that story for positive action, it really hurts us. And I think the sooner you can make peace with that and not hold it back, I think it's just, my life has expanded tenfold since I decided to, take the risk and be vulnerable and share that story. And the friendships that I've made since then are just on a whole new level, and I wouldn't go back. So I don't know how to encourage somebody to take the steps, but it's really one of those things that, once you go there, your mind expands. So I just feel really blessed that I learned that, a couple of years ago and not in another 25 years.
Well, let's leave that part of your life behind. Other than to say, do you keep in contact with Brian?
What's funny is I tell that story. I've never reached out to Brian yet, and it's on my list. So everybody usually goes, "Oh, you should tell him," and I will. I've told that story. Maybe Brian's seen me tell it, but I haven't seen him since I was 16.
Because that would be the ultimate recognition. That would be the ultimate buying a coffee for somebody, wouldn't it? That he just receives something from you, totally doesn't expect it. You don't know whether it's been received well or not, but you've done it. You've paid it forward. It seems strange, really, that you're a chap who is quite willing to reach out in kindness to complete strangers, but somebody who fundamentally changed your life hasn't had the recognition and probably doesn't even know that one conversation did change your life in such a positive way.
I don't think he does. And you know what? It's enough excuses. I'm going to do that today.
There you go. We've both changed our lives. I'm going to buy a coffee for somebody and you do that. So let's get back to that moment. He's had a word with you and you've decided to change and you go into entrepreneurial ventures. And as most of us do, the first one is a failure and then the next one's a failure. Then you said, then I finally worked it out. Is it a structure? Is it something that you can work out? Can you have X amount of failures and then go, yes, I can see why that one failed, that one failed, that one failed, and bring it all together?
100%. The thing that changed for me when I was 26 and I finally figured it out and I didn't fail yet again was that I reached out of desperation because essentially I was going bankrupt again. Not bank, like the company was failing. I found 3 people that had been there before and that have done it. And I think it sounds trivial. It sounds so simple to actually reach out to people that have had the level of success that you want, ask them for advice. But, 2.5 ventures in and I still had never done that. But that was the number
that's
one
common,
thing.
Isn't it? That's a common human trait. You feel that they're going to go, I'm too busy, but they don't, do they? They will reach out.
No, I mean, I think the fear is I'm not worthy. I don't want to bug them. My ideas are probably stupid. They're not going to respond to me. They're going to listen to me and think that, I have no clue what I'm doing. They're going to tell me things I don't want to hear. They might tell me things I know I should do that I'm scared to do. There's 100 reasons why you don't. But the truth for me is I didn't even know that was a good idea. At that age, I mean, it sounds crazy, but again, I grew up in a small town of 100,000 people, and the best entrepreneurial person in my life was my good friend Nick that owned a sign shop, right? They made signs for businesses, and he used to, his advice was so crazy. He used to argue with me that you should be late for meetings with customers so that they know that you're busy and they should want to work with your business. And that's, that was the quality of advice I was getting. So I didn't even know until I was 26 that the right thing is to find people that have been in that level. I mean, I always joke, most people, when they have big life decisions, they turn to their parents. And unless your parents have the level of success that you're trying to achieve, I would argue that that's probably not the right person to turn to make that decision. Yet 80% of the population does that.
Well, when I decided to have my leap of faith and leave my 9-to-5 job, I wasn't expecting to do this. I was going to go in and be a web developer, and then I decided very quickly it was going to do my brain in being a web developer, so I just couldn't do it. And I did what you said. I reached out to people who were already doing this, only to sort of say to them, I'm thinking of doing this. You're a huge inspiration to me. Thank you so much. I didn't even ask anything from them. It was just my way of actually going, I've connected somehow. I've connected with people that are doing it. And in the online world, you can connect virtually or you can connect with a person attached, can't you? You've got so much power. Even if it's to type in how to, you will find out how people have achieved certain things. You know, like WordPress and all these kind of stuff that bogs you down. It doesn't take you long to type in a few words. So you have got that ability to connect with people and ease the way very, very quickly.
Yeah, well, it's funny because, you know, when I started, there was no LinkedIn, there was no online directory, no Twitter, no Facebook, no searching of, you know, I couldn't find a list of entrepreneurs in my city unless I had to go door to door and ask people. So, I mean, the tools and information that's available now is tenfold, but for some reason, I don't think we have 10 times or 100 times more entrepreneurs. So it's really a cultural thing, a psychological thing, and really maybe just an awareness. That's why, like, to me, whenever somebody asks me what's the number one thing you would suggest an entrepreneur should do, it's find an advisor, a mentor, somebody that's been there before, and I usually show them how to do that, because that is going to be the most impactful thing you could do. And I still do it every day. I did it last night. I mean, I'm working on a new project. I've never done this before. I reached out to a dozen people and I spent time with one of them last night. I mean, it's just how I operate now. And I think that the sooner you can learn that action, that process, that approach, the more success you're going to have in life. And this is personal too. If you want to have a great personal life with your family and relationships, find somebody that you admire that has that and ask them how they've done it.
Did you think failures are part of the journey, though? Did you think that people have to, in their head, expect that it's not going to be an overnight success? Because we benchmark ourselves against people who are there in front of us, and we only see them when they are in front of us and they are successful. Do you think that people rationally have to go, it's not going to be overnight, it's going to be 6 months, it's going to be a year, it's going to be 2 years, whatever, but as long as I put enough effort into it and I keep on persevering, it will come true?
Yeah, the whole word failure is kind of funny because, you know, I learned how to make $1 on the internet, you know, when I was 17, 18. So if that's fail, I mean, as much as it was a failed, you know, business enterprise, you know, because I picked a really small target market and, you know, I couldn't scale the business, I learned so much. So it's kind of one of those things where I don't even like the word failure, because I feel if you've learned something that you could apply to the next business and you don't stop, that you're ahead. So, but that being said, I think that in your business on a daily, sometimes, you know, weekly, monthly basis, you will try things that don't work out the way you do, and really learning how to deal with that situation and move forward is the thing you need to learn how to do. So you can call it failure, you can call it challenges, you can call it opportunities, right? Or you call them learning moments. It's really that decision on when things don't go the way I expect them to, how do I react to that, and building a positive, exciting, mature approach to that that's disconnected from emotion and not beating yourself up too much, I think is what makes great entrepreneurs great entrepreneurs.
Keep on moving forward when you get a punch in the mouth. Just keep on going.
100%. I mean, the best quote I've ever seen recently, Elon Musk. He's super famous for creating Tesla, SpaceX, Solar City, built PayPal, sold it. You know, what I would consider one of the best entrepreneurs of the century. I would even argue better than Steve Jobs, and I'm a huge Apple fan. So that says a lot. Elon Musk said, even if you know it's going to fail, sometimes if it's important to do, you must do it anyways. And he said this for Tesla. He said, I didn't expect the electric car to work, but I needed to do it because I felt like it would show people there would be a better way.
Yeah,
and
I
I thought
see that.
That's powerful.
Yeah, well, that is, isn't it? It's the old thing. You know, I'm on the start of my journey, but I was interviewed on a show a little while ago, and the chap who was interviewing me said, you know, what do you look back and go, yes, that was a failure? And I said, well, I don't want to be arrogant, but I don't think I've ever had a failure. There's been things that haven't worked, but I've learned from them. It's the classic learning 1,000 ways not to make a light bulb, isn't it?
100%. That's why, like, I know that, you know, people that have not experience that, the language they use is failure, and the unfortunate part is they want to hear the success, right? Like, you started off this podcast talking about kind of, you know, the things that I've achieved, and that is human nature. So it's kind of, I call it success theater. Like, I got to go on stage, talk about my success, but then my approach is here's how I screwed it up. Here's the lessons I learned, and here's what I would do different and what I do different today, because that's my approach. Some people don't do that. No, I've never heard Donald Trump admit to screwing anything up. And that's probably why I have no emotional connection with the guy. I don't admire him whatsoever. And I wouldn't want to spend any money to be around him, because I don't think it's real. So, I think that a lot of times we have to talk about this thing called failure and then talk about success to get somebody engaged. But at the end of the day, we know that they weren't failures because they just added to the knowledge that allowed us to do bigger things after the fact.
Absolutely. Let me play some motivational content for you. This is one of my favourite speeches, and it took me by surprise when I saw it because it's not from a source that I would have expected it. This is Rocky Balboa. Have a listen to this.
You, me, or nobody is going to hit as hard as life. But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done.
Now, is that true? Is it the fact that we've got to accept that we're going to get punched, but we brush ourselves down and keep going? Is it... Are humans now being programmed to the fast route, the American Idol route, where you suddenly sing a belting song and suddenly you've been plucked and you are a star overnight? Do we need to get back to realism and say we're on a journey and it's part of the journey that we gain the experience for the next part of the journey?
It's so tough because that quote, that Rocky conversation, it kind of talked about what we just suggested, right? It's kind of here's the part that's tough with that question is I admire these young 17, 18-year-old entrepreneurs that just want to take over the world, that believe in their heart that they've got the $1 billion idea, the next Facebook. And I don't want that to stop. Right? Even though that I know that it's going to be a lot harder, I call it uninformed optimism, right? Versus informed pessimism. I think it's something that we should cherish, but at the same time, be there to support them when it doesn't go that way. So I don't want to be the guy that says you shouldn't think that way and it's going to take longer and all these things, because it may not. And there's examples of it being it's never an overnight success, but it's definitely a rocket ship, right? Like Uber would be an example of a new company and whatnot. But I think it's just, we got to get to a point where we support people thinking crazy, right? And not try to bring them down to earth too much, because it's actually in those crazy thoughts where magic happens, right? It's in those moments of uninformed optimism that somebody, and like yourself, just decides one day that I don't want to do this anymore, regardless if it makes sense financially or to your parents or your friends and family. And I think that we should support people to think that way and just be there when reality hits to keep them moving forward.
So you couldn't be a judge on, say, American Idol. You couldn't be a Simon Cowell who goes, nope, you haven't got it. You would be the one that kind of goes, look, it might not be right for you now, but keep on going at it. Keep on going at it.
I mean, that's the problem with I invest in other tech companies now that I do it essentially to deal with my ADD when I see cool industries forming, and I would love to start a business in that industry. I just invest in it through another entrepreneur. And when I meet these entrepreneurs, even if I think the idea is bad, I just suggest the approach, because the other thing I've learned, is my opinion doesn't matter, and the thoughts on how you'll be successful, if you are successful, are probably not even going to be the right approach, because you're not me and I'm not you, and there's just different contexts. So the best thing I can always do is just suggest, this high level framework for them to move forward and really just listen and learn and adjust, because who knows, right? Every idea from PayPal wasn't supposed to be what it is that became successful, right? Facebook wasn't the way Facebook is today, isn't what it started off as, that ended up being successful. And I just think that's more important. It's a more honest and appropriate response to young entrepreneurs than to just be the harsh critic. Now, that doesn't make good TV, so I get why Simon Cowell does that.
So with your life, and you've gone through multiple companies, and you've built companies, and then you've sold them. Why have you done that? Why have you moved on? Do you get bored with the creation? Are you somebody that is always looking for the next shiny thing, or do you just go, no, that's what I wanted of it, and I can't do anything more?
No, it's really, I mean, every time I make that decision, it's really about just opportunity costs, right? I don't believe that I've got all the time in the world and that I'm going to live to be 150 years old. I kind of look at my life and what do I want to accomplish over the next 5 years? So, with the company Spheric, when the opportunity rose for some U.S. firms that reached out that wanted to acquire us, it was really just, what's the number and can I take that capital and invest it in something else that I feel like I could have a bigger impact faster, sooner than if I continued down this path? And the answer was yes. And the same thing happened when I started Flowtown, and 2 years later, we raised venture capital from some amazing investors in Silicon Valley, and there was this opportunity to sell the company, and we looked at the numbers, and I just asked myself, it's like, do we keep going down this path, raising more capital and trying to accomplish this, or can we create more value and have more impact if we take the outcome and sell now? And I think that for me is the right way to approach life, because most people, I don't really care. Like, I just want to work with brilliant people and have customers that I love and solve a problem that I'm passionate about in the biggest way possible. If that means selling the company to an acquirer that has more resources at the moment and more expertise and is going to be able to amplify that, then the answer is yes. If I feel that they can't and I can, I keep building. So it's not about losing faith in the product or getting bored with it. It's really just that decision of impact and what I want to accomplish in my life. And if you look at every company I've done, everyone has been, magnitude or bigger, more impactful, and scaled faster. So, I've been in it now for 10 years. I'm 34 now. I started Spheric when I was 24, and 3 companies and millions of exits. I'm feeling pretty good with it.
Well, and there's no sort of an emotional attachment. There's no kind of, like when Steve Jobs, he created Apple and then they got rid of him and he went into a black hole, because this was my company and I hadn't finished it. It was still his baby. You're quite happy to go, it was my baby, but now it's a young man and it's leaving.
I'd be full of crap if I said that was true. The first one, Spheric, I went through that. After the company was bought and I woke up. I remember the day I woke up and I started having anxiety attacks because for the first time in a long time, 6 years since I've been starting companies, nobody cared if I got out of bed. It was the weirdest feeling ever. It was so bad. I'd get these anxiety attacks. Eventually I had to go see somebody, and he made me walk around with a rock in my pocket and squeeze it every time I felt that way. And I thought, what's going on? And he explained to me that what I was feeling was no different than a parent losing their child, right? Where I had this attachment to this company that was an extension of who I was as a person, and everything, up to that point for the last 4 years, 100-hour weeks was what I invested my thoughts and time in. And to have that not there anymore was a huge loss that I didn't even realize until after the fact. And that taught me a huge lesson to disconnect the company and my value to the world and self-worth to the organization, because they're just not connected whatsoever. And I should never have approached it that way.
So what scares you now then? So you're going into bigger and bigger things. So generally you're going into areas that you haven't been in before, so out of your comfort zone. Are you surrounded with such a close network that they will protect you from decisions that you might be making that maybe aren't right because you haven't got the experience, or are you sticking to what you know?
Oh, I never stick to what I know. I mean, that the fun part of building is creating things that you've never created before. If I just sat down and painted the same painting every day, I'd probably want to jump off a cliff. So it's always about pushing, what I'm interested in and new boundaries and new approaches, and just the beauty of technology companies, and that's the world I live in, is we're creating innovation that's never existed, right? Like, so my current company, Clarity, allows, anybody around the world to connect with somebody else over the phone to get advice in something that they need to move forward on. It's kind of like, it's the same thing as if Google indexed everybody's brains for expertise and advice and created a marketplace that would just allow anybody to tap into it and talk to those people. That's what I'm trying to solve, and we have solved that scale. We've done a couple 100,000 calls in the last 18 months. So I I have smart people around me, but I still take big risks. But I guess I always have to calculate the risk to impact and potential, so that I don't gamble too much so that everything dies. So I take risks, but it's always calculated.
And you have a faith, you have a trust that it's going to work out all right for you?
Yeah, well, I have a faith that I'd rather, so my belief is if there's a 10% chance that I can have an impact on 1 billion people, or 100% chance that I can impact 100 people, I would rather take the 10% on 1 billion, because the outcome of potential 10% of 1 billion is a lot more than 100. And that's my approach to risk.
I think that's a sensible approach, isn't it?
I think so, but I don't, I don't think it's the common beliefs or common approach to life. But, I think I don't know, it's just more fun. And again, maybe it's because I'm always looking for the next exciting thing to take on within my company. But that's the way we kind of prioritize the initiatives in our company.
Because I remember when I started this, the very first episode I released, I got a couple of emails, and it blew me away, but I got a couple of emails. And then I started getting 10, 15, 20 emails, and that was even more exciting. Then it got to a point I thought, I don't think I'm going to be able to cope with this. What am I opening up here? Unfortunately, it stayed level at about sort of 20 emails a day, which is still a lot for me to sort of respond to. But that potential of, my God, this is a global market. And when you suddenly see things coming to you from Arizona and Kenya and Australia, it really is scalable, isn't it? Once you click that computer, you have got a global market. And they say that, but until you're actually in it, you don't realize what the potential rewards are.
I think that was what I'd experienced when I was 17. When I learned to program and I built my first website and I published it. There was this moment where I'm sitting there and I realized that anybody with the internet in the world can see what I just created by going to this link. And contrasting that with my father's career, who was an electrical kind of engineer that worked on motors. Like, I don't really know what he did. I've never seen anything he's done. I don't know what he did day to day. And here was this opportunity for me to actually build a career around things that people anywhere in the world can just see and use. And I mean, Clarity, we've done calls across 62 countries. And I just blows my mind that ability is there. And again, people don't take advantage of it because it's accessible to all of us in our pockets on a phone. It's magical.
Well, let's bring the words of somebody who created a phone, which many, many people are quite fond of. This is the words of Steve Jobs, and this is really the theme of the show, whether we can actually join up our dots and we can connect the path that has brought us here. So I'm going to play the words, and once he finishes, then I'm going to ask how relevant they are to Dan Martell. This is Steve Jobs.
Of course, it was impossible to connect the dots looking forward when I was in college, but it was very, very clear looking backwards 10 years later. Again, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever. Because believing that the dots will connect down the road will give you the confidence to follow your heart even when it leads you off the well-worn path. And that will make all the difference.
Are they the kind of words that we should have in the education system?
100%. I mean, that is everything.
What does it mean to you? What words do you take from that? Do you think, yeah, that really is spot on?
Well, it's kind of like all the stories that I've shared with you today, they all, in hindsight, they make sense, right? Like when I launched Clarity, when I came up with the idea for it, it occurred to me, my belief that you should only get advice from people that have been through it before. I learned when I was 17 in rehab, because the rehab center that I went to was unique in the sense that all the staff that worked there were ex-drug addicts. Because that's what works for me, is getting advice from people when you're down in that hole and you're feeling like crap and you're trying to figure out how to get your hands and feet positioned to climb out of it. The last thing I wanted was some guy that just showed up that read a book, is trying to tell me what to do, versus somebody that's actually been in that hole and is guiding me through it. And I think that, when I look at my career path and the things that I've done in the way that I interact with my friends and my family today. And I'm fortunate. I mean, I have an amazing relationship with both my parents and my brothers and sisters. And none of those things would have happened if I didn't go through the things that I went through and strive to create the things that I've created. And, there was no connecting the dots looking forward, only in hindsight. So that's why I think it gives me more faith in taking on new things, knowing that there's a reason why I even came up with these ideas that I should move forward on, because somehow it's all going to make sense.
So you are more sort of gut intuition more than anything?
I'm 100% gut and intuition, backed by data.
Oh, that's a powerful statement. So you had that, this is a good idea, but then if you crunch the numbers and it doesn't seem quite, you will leave it behind.
Yeah, it's kind of like, again, the opportunity potential. It's you crunch the numbers and make sure there's a market. You make sure that there are actions that people might do or are doing in a different format, and then it's just a probability thing. I mean, people don't understand, like when they watch extreme athletes go down the mountain and hit these jumps and spin in circles and land, like these are very calculated, thoughtful athletes. Like they're not just going to get drunk, jump on a ski and do something crazy. Like these people have started at the beginning, and they started with hitting a little jump, and over the years they've gotten to the point where they've progressed to what they're doing. But people think they're crazy, but they're not. They're no crazier than the Steve Jobs or the Richard Bransons or the Mark Cubans of the world, where their first move was in $1 billion company. But for them to do $1 billion today is like somebody doing 100,000. It's just, they're just more zeros, but they progress to that level, and I think that's the way you got to look at life.
I agree totally. You're preaching to the converted here. I was just glad to get 10 listeners, and then it went to 1,000 listeners, and then it went to 16,000 listeners, and then I'm kind of thinking, wow, where's this going to go? But it's no more scary. It's only me doing this, hopefully to the best ability that I can do. And that's the scalable thing that I keep on coming back to. And I say to my kids now, they're 12 and they're 9. And so hopefully they're getting grabbed at an early age where I can say to them, at the end of the day, dream big and then dream bigger. Because the bigger you can dream, the less competition you've got out there, because so many people don't. And all I'm trying to say to them is, find something, and if you can scale it but doing the same amount of work, then that is really what you need to aim for.
100%. I believe that the difference between the guy that starts $1 million company and a $10 million company is that he decided. That is it. They decided that it's not more work. It's not more time. It's the same amount of time, same amount of work, but it's different actions because they made a different decision at the onset. And that is when I realized that I can create a company that will have a positive impact on 1 billion people. And the only reason that I can or can't do that is because I make a decision and be deliberate. That just unlocked it for me. And that's honestly what I learned moving to San Francisco and being around some of the smartest people in the world is I learned to think in a way that, and because I got to see it firsthand, see that it was possible, that I can never go back. I could never create anything with less impact than that, because I know it's possible and it's worth doing. And even if it fails, I'd be okay having tried doing that versus failing at doing something that was mediocre.
You became conscious. You became conscious
100%.
of opportunities, yeah. Right, this is the end of the show, Dan. I really don't want this conversation. I should make it a 3-hour one. But this is the part when I send you back in time on the Sermon on the Mic. And I'm going to play the theme tune. And as it's playing, you're going to be transported back into a room where you will have a one-on-one with your younger self. And if you could have a one-on-one, what age Dan Martell would you choose and what advice would you give him? Well, we're going to find out, because this is the Sermon on the Mic.
Here we go with the best bit of the show, the Sermon on the Mic, the Sermon on the Mic.
Hey, little Dan, this is Big Dan. I wanted to share a few things with you because I want to help you do more sooner and take bigger risks sooner. Step one, I'm going to say that don't feel like you aren't a good person. That's number one. I think you are a good person. people love you. You are thoughtful and caring, and just because you had some challenges in your life doesn't mean that you should continue feeling that it's your fault. So that's the first thing I want to tell you. The second would be that share openly and honestly about who you are and what motivates you and what scares you and what excites you with people. Find things you're passionate about and discover them and play with them and tinker and then teach other people and share that passion of discovery with anybody that's willing to listen, and find good people to spend time with. And on that note, the last thing I want to say is, as soon as possible, find somebody that you admire for what they've done in their life. And it doesn't have to be huge. It could be the fact that they're always smiling in the world and you think that's remarkable, or it could be that they've started a company and created a product or service that you use, that you love going to visit or buying, and approach them and just letting them know and seeing if they're willing to spend time with you, because spending time with those people and hanging out with those that make you feel good will mean the world. It'll just allow you to be happier sooner, faster, in a bigger way. So those are the things that I hope you take and implement today.
Big Dan, how can our audience connect with you, sir?
That's a great question. I'm on Twitter at Dan Martell, 2 L's to Martell. My blog is danmartell.com. I'm on Clarity, if you want to check that out, clarity.fm/Dan Martell. But the best way is to follow me on Twitter. I share all the inspirational things, business tips and ideas and stuff that I'm trying on Twitter. And I love to engage and hear from you. So just tweet at me and say hi if you listened.
Well, we will have all those links on the show notes. Dan, thank you so much for spending time with us today, joining up those dots. Please come back again when you have more dots to join up, because I do believe that by joining up those dots and connecting our pasts is the best way to build our futures. Dan Martell, thank you so much.
All the best. Thanks for having me.
David doesn't want you to become a faded version of the brilliant self you were once to become. So he's put together an amazing guide for you called the 8 Pieces of Advice That Every Successful Entrepreneur Practices, including the 2 that changed his life. Head over to joinupdots.com to download this amazing guide for free, and we'll see you tomorrow on Join Up Dots.